The barn door slammed open, and Bernice Sullivan stumbled into Iron Mesa's dusty Depot Street, camera bag swinging wild as thunder cracked overhead, and the stranger in the black hat grabbed her elbow before she fell straight into the mud. March 1887 in Dakota Territory meant dust storms that turned noon into twilight, and this one had caught her halfway between the stagecoach and the only hotel for 30 miles.
Easy there. You trying to break that camera, or just your neck?
His voice carried the rough edge of a man who didn't waste words. Hazel eyes scanning her face, then the street, like he expected trouble from both directions. She yanked her arm free and steadied herself against the depot wall, steel blue eyes meeting his without flinching.
I can manage my own neck, thank you, and my camera's worth more than this whole sorry excuse for a town.
He almost smiled, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth, then tipped his hat back and nodded toward the hotel porch.
Hotel's full up. Storm brought in twice the usual crowd, but the cabin behind it's got a spare room if you don't mind sharing the main space with a couple of ranch hands.
She brushed dust off her cream blouse and tan split-riding skirt, chestnut hair coming loose from its pins in the wind.
I mind less than I mind sleeping in a stagecoach. Lead the way.
He turned without another word, dark brown hair curling at his collar, tan work shirt, and dark vest marking him as working stock, not fancy. And she followed him across the street as the first fat raindrops started hitting the boards. The cabin was small but solid. One main room with a stone fireplace and 2 bedroom doors on opposite walls. And he pushed the door open just as the sky opened up for real.
Name's Hiram Sullivan. I'm the other renter tonight. Those ranch hands found a spot in the barn last minute, so it's just us.
She set her camera bag down carefully on the rough wooden table and turned to face him, realizing for the first time how broad his shoulders were in the lamplight.
Bernice Sullivan. And if we're stuck together, we might as well make the best of it.
He raised one eyebrow at the shared last name, but didn't comment. Just moved to the fireplace and started building up the fire while rain hammered the roof. She unpacked her camera equipment, hands steady despite the way her heart was still racing from the near fall outside, and caught him watching her from the corner of his eye.
You really a photographer? Or is that just a fancy way to travel alone?
I really take pictures, and I'm really alone by choice, so don't get ideas about keeping me company.
He laughed outright at that, a warm sound that surprised them both, and shook his head as he stood up from the fire.
Lady, I got enough company in my life. I'm not looking for more.
The rain kept up through the afternoon and into evening, trapping them in the cabin with nothing but firelight and the sound of water on the roof. And Bernice found herself watching Hiram more than she meant to. He moved with the easy confidence of a man used to hard work, checking the fire, heating water for coffee, never wasting motion. And when he caught her staring, he just grinned.
Something on my face, or you just bored?
Wondering what a man like you is doing hiding in a railroad siding during a storm. You don't strike me as the type to wait out weather.
His grin faded, and he turned back to the coffee pot, shoulders tight.
Not hiding, just passing through, same as you.
She didn't believe him for a second, but let it drop, pouring herself coffee when he offered, and sitting in the rocking chair while he took the floor by the fire. They drank in silence for a minute. Then he cleared his throat.
What brings a photographer to Iron Mesa anyway? Not exactly a picture-taking kind of place.
Gold strike up in the hills. Families coming and going. People want portraits before they head out or after they strike it. I make a living following the crowds.
He nodded slowly, firelight catching the hard line of his jaw.
Smart, and safer than most ways to make money out here.
Safe, until I get stuck in cabins with strange men during storms.
He laughed again and raised his coffee cup in a mock toast.
Fair point. But I promise I'm harmless.
She smiled despite herself and felt the tension in the room ease just a fraction. Then a heavy knock rattled the door, and they both jumped. Hiram stood fast, hand dropping to his hip, where no gun hung, and moved to the door with his body blocking hers from view.
Who's there?
A voice came through the wood, rough and impatient. The sheriff needs to see you both. Got some questions about the stagecoach. Hiram glanced back at Bernice, and she shook her head, no idea what this was about. But he opened the door anyway, and two men in rain-slicked coats stood on the porch, neither wearing a badge. The taller one smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. We heard there was a photographer on the stage today. Need to ask about a passenger you might have seen.
I saw plenty of passengers. Which one?
The man's smile widened, and he stepped into the cabin without invitation, his partner following. And Bernice stood up fast as her chair scraped back. The man ignored Hiram completely and focused on her. The one carrying a locket, silver with a photograph inside. You see anyone like that? She kept her face blank, but her mind raced, remembering the older woman 2 seats down who'd clutched a locket the whole ride and gotten off early at the last water stop.
Can't say I noticed. Why does it matter?
The man's hand moved, and firelight caught on a turquoise ring, bright and out of place on his dirty fingers, and he gestured toward her camera bag. Because that locket don't belong to her, and my employer wants it back. So if you took any pictures, we'll need to see them. Hiram stepped between them, smooth as water, his voice dropping low and dangerous.
The lady said she didn't see it, so you can take your questions and your employer and get out.
The man's smile vanished, and his hand dropped toward his coat, but the partner grabbed his arm and pulled him back toward the door. We'll be back when the sheriff's actually with us. Don't leave town. The door slammed, and their boots thumped off the porch into the rain, and Bernice let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding.
That wasn't the sheriff.
No, it wasn't. And whoever their employer is, he's got money and muscle. That ring alone cost more than most folks see in a year.
She moved to the window and watched the two shapes disappear into the storm, then turned back to Hiram.
I did see the locket. The woman who had it got off early and she looked scared, like someone was chasing her.
Then we got a problem. Because those men will be back, and they won't ask nice next time.
He moved to the door and checked the latch, then pulled the single chair over and wedged it under the handle.
We should leave at first light. Get you on the next stage out before this gets worse.
I'm not running from hired thugs. I came here to work, and I'm staying. Besides, what about you? They'll come after you too, just for helping me.
He met her eyes, and something passed between them, a shared stubbornness that made them both almost smile.
Then I guess we're stuck together until this blows over.
She crossed her arms and leaned against the table, heart pounding, but not from fear anymore.
I've had worse partners.
They took turns sleeping that night, Bernice in the bedroom and Hiram by the fire. But when dawn broke gray and wet, she found him already up and pacing.
I asked around last night before the rain hit. That woman with the locket was headed to the Caldwell Ranch, biggest spread in the territory, and the owner just died, without a clear will.
So the locket matters because of inheritance. Someone wants to prove a claim or disprove one.
Exactly. And Beaumont Caldwell, the old man's nephew. He's been squeezing small ranchers for months, trying to consolidate power before anyone contests the estate.
She poured coffee and handed him a cup. their fingers brushing for just a second, and she felt that jolt again.
The men last night worked for him.
Had to. No one else in the territory wears turquoise like that. Beaumont collects jewelry like trophies. Every time he takes over a ranch, he takes something from the family.
Anger flared hot in her chest, and she set her cup down hard.
So what do we do? Find the woman and warn her.
We find the woman and get that locket to someone who can actually do something with it. The circuit judge is due in 3 days. If we can hold out that long, we might have a chance.
She nodded and moved to pack her camera, then stopped.
I want to photograph the evidence. If the locket has a picture that proves something, we need a record in case it gets destroyed.
Smart. But we need to move fast. Beaumont's men will be watching the roads.
They slipped out the back as the rain eased to drizzle, cutting through the alley behind the hotel and heading for the stables. And Bernice felt Hiram's hand on her lower back as they ducked under a low awning. He pulled her close as 2 riders passed on the main street, both scanning faces, and she held her breath with her cheek pressed against his chest.
Wait.
His heart hammered under her ear, and his arm tightened around her waist. And for a second, neither of them moved even after the riders were gone. Then, he stepped back and cleared his throat.
Sorry. Didn't mean to grab you.
You kept me from getting seen. I'll allow it.
They reached the stable, and Hiram paid the boy to saddle 2 horses, fast and quiet. And within 10 minutes, they were riding out the north trail toward the Caldwell Ranch. The morning was cool and damp, clouds hanging low over the mesas, and Bernice's camera bag bounced against her hip as they pushed the horses to a steady lope.
You ride well for a photographer.
I ride well for anyone. My father ran freight wagons and I grew up in the saddle.
He grinned at that and urged his horse faster, and she matched him stride for stride, the competition easy and unspoken between them. They covered 5 miles before the trail split, and Hiram reined in, pointing toward a narrow canyon pass on the left.
That's the back way to Caldwell Land if they're moving stolen cattle at night like folks say. That's the route they'd use.
Then, let's see what we find.
They turned into the canyon, and the walls rose steep on both sides. Red rock streaked with iron, and the air felt 10 degrees cooler in the shade. Hoof prints marked the dirt, too many to count, and Hiram dismounted to study them close.
Fresh. Maybe last night. They moved a herd through here recently.
Bernice stayed mounted and scanned the canyon rim, unease prickling her neck. Then she saw movement, and her heart stopped.
Hiram. Riders coming from behind.
He swung into the saddle, and they spurred forward just as 3 men appeared at the canyon mouth, one raising a rifle. The shot cracked loud in the confined space, and rock exploded near Bernice's head. Sharp fragments stinging her cheek, and she leaned low over her horse's neck as they galloped deeper into the pass.
Stay close.
Another shot, closer this time, and Hiram grabbed her reins and pulled both horses left into a side cut barely wide enough for one rider. They crashed through scrub brush and scrambled up a steep incline, rocks sliding under hooves, and Bernice's camera bag slammed into her ribs hard enough to bruise. The side cut opened onto a ledge 20 feet above the main canyon floor, and Hiram hauled both horses to a stop, breathing hard.
We can see them from here, but they can't get a clean shot. We wait them out.
She slid off her horse and crouched behind a boulder, lungs burning, and checked her camera. Still intact, Hiram knelt beside her and peered over the rock, watching the riders below search the canyon floor.
They'll figure out where we went eventually. We got maybe 10 minutes.
Then we use the time. Look.
She pointed across the canyon to the opposite wall, where a cluster of buildings sat tucked into a natural shelf. Corrals full of cattle and smoke, rising from a chimney.
That's not Caldwell Ranch. It's too small. But those cattle have his brand.
Holding pen. They bring stolen stock here to rebrand before moving it to market. If we can get proof of that, the judge will have to act.
She already had her camera out, setting it on the boulder and adjusting the focus. And Hiram watched her work with something like admiration in his eyes.
This light's not great, but I can get the brands clear enough. Just keep watch.
He shifted closer, his shoulder pressing against hers for balance, and she tried to ignore the way her pulse jumped at the contact. 3 clicks. 4. The cattle brands sharp in her viewfinder, and then one of the riders below shouted and pointed up.
Time to move.
They scrambled back to the horses, but the ledge was narrow, and loose rock crumbled under Bernice's boots, her foot sliding toward the edge, and Hiram lunged forward, grabbing her forearm and waist, and hauling her back against his chest. They stood frozen for a heartbeat, his arms locked around her, and her hands clutching his shoulders. Faces inches apart, with the canyon drop right behind them.
You scared me.
You saved me.
His eyes searched hers, and she saw something raw there, something that made her breath catch. Then a rifle shot spanged off rock 3 feet away, and they broke apart. He boosted her into the saddle and swung up on his own horse, and they took off along the ledge at a reckless gallop. The trail so narrow her stirrups scraped the canyon wall. The ledge wound higher, and finally spilled onto the mesa top, open ground stretching in every direction. And they ran flat out for the horizon, while shots echoed behind them. They didn't stop until Iron Mesa's buildings appeared on the southern horizon, horses lathered and blowing, and Hiram finally slowed to a walk.
That was close. Too close. Beaumont knows we're onto him now.
Good. Let him know. We have proof, and we're not backing down.
He looked at her like she'd grown a second head, then shook his own and laughed.
You're either the bravest woman I ever met, or the craziest.
Can't I be both?
They reached the edge of town and dismounted behind the livery, keeping to the alleys, and Hiram caught her hand as she started toward the main street.
We need to get those photographs developed and into safe hands. You know anyone in town we can trust?
The preacher, maybe. He's not local, and he's got no reason to side with Beaumont.
Good thinking. But we go careful. Beaumont's got eyes everywhere.
They made it 3 steps before a man stepped out of the shadows, turquoise ring flashing as he gestured them to stop, and Bernice's stomach dropped. It was one of the men from the cabin, and he wasn't alone. 4 more appeared from doorways and corners, boxing them in, and the man smiled cold. Your pictures belong to Mr. Caldwell now. Hand over the camera.
Not a chance.
The man's smile vanished, and he nodded to his crew, and they moved in fast. Hiram shoved Bernice behind him and caught the first man with a hard right that dropped him flat, then ducked a second swing and kicked another in the knee. Bernice swung her camera bag like a weapon and caught one man across the face, the heavy leather connecting with a solid thunk, and he staggered back, cursing.
Run.
She ran, Hiram right behind her, and they cut through the alley toward the back of the church. Boots pounded after them and someone yelled for them to stop, but they burst through the church's rear door and slammed it behind them, throwing the bolt. The preacher looked up from his Bible, startled, and Hiram held up both hands.
We need help, and we need it fast. Beaumont Caldwell's trying to steal an inheritance, and we have proof.
The preacher was older but sharp-eyed, and he stood up calm as Sunday. I heard about the locket and the woman She came through here 2 days ago asking for sanctuary. I sent her to the Sisters of Mercy mission 10 miles east. She should be safe there.
We need to get these photographs to the circuit judge. Can you hide them until he arrives?
The preacher nodded and took the camera, his hand steady. I'll keep them in the altar safe. No one will touch them. But you two need to get out of town before Beaumont's men break that door down. As if on cue, fists hammered the wood, and voices shouted outside. Hiram grabbed Bernice's hand and pulled her toward the side door that led to the rectory garden, and they slipped out just as the back door splintered. The garden wall was low, and they vaulted it together, landing hard in the alley beyond, and kept running.
The mission. We need to get to that woman before Beaumont does. If he gets the locket, we lose everything.
Our horses are still at the livery.
We'll take the freight wagon. I saw one being loaded at the depot this morning. If we're fast, we can grab it.
They sprinted for the depot, dodging between buildings, and found the wagon still hitched with supplies for the eastern homesteads. Hiram jumped into the driver's seat, and Bernice climbed up beside him, and he snapped the reins hard. The horses lurched into motion, and the wagon rumbled onto the main street, picking up speed, and shouts erupted behind them as Beaumont's men realized what was happening.
Hold on.
He whipped the team into a full run, and the wagon careened around the corner, wheels lifting on one side, and Bernice grabbed the seat rail with both hands. A rider appeared beside them, reaching for the harness, and she kicked out hard, her boot catching him in the shoulder and sending him tumbling into the dirt.
Keep going.
The depot fell behind, and they hit the open trail, the wagon bouncing over ruts and rocks. And Hiram leaned into the turns like he was born to it. Bernice glanced back and saw 3 riders in pursuit, gaining fast, and her heart hammered.
They're coming.
I see them. There's a rail yard 2 miles ahead. If we can reach it, we might lose them in the freight traffic.
The rail yard appeared over the next rise, a sprawl of tracks and boxcars and coal piles, and Hiram aimed straight for it. They crashed into the yard with the wagon rattling fit to shake apart, and he hauled the team left between 2 long freight trains. A whistle blew sharp and loud, and one of the trains started moving, slow but building speed.
Jump.
He grabbed her waist, and they leaped from the moving wagon onto the platform between 2 boxcars, hitting hard and rolling, and the wagon careened away without them. The train picked up speed, and Bernice scrambled to her feet, Hiram already pulling her toward the nearest boxcar. The door was half open, and he boosted her up, then hauled himself in after, and they collapsed against the back wall as the train gathered momentum. Outside, the riders shouted and fired wild shots. But the train was moving too fast now, and the bullets went wide.
Did we just steal a train?
Borrowed. We'll jump off at the next water stop.
She started laughing, breathless and half crazy with adrenaline, and he grinned back at her.
You're having fun.
I'm terrified and furious, and I haven't felt this alive in years.
He reached over and brushed a smudge of dirt off her cheek, his thumb lingering, and her laughter faded into something else.
We make a good team.
We make a crazy team.
Same thing.
The train rocked and swayed, carrying them east toward the mission, and Bernice let herself lean against his shoulder.
What happens when this is over, and the judge rules?
I don't know. I came here to disappear, and you came here to work. Not sure either of us planned on this.
Plans change.
He looked down at her, and something shifted in his expression. Something warm and real.
Yeah. They do.
The train slowed for the water stop just as dusk settled, and they jumped off into the scrub grass 100 yards from the mission buildings. The Sisters of Mercy compound was small, but sturdy, whitewashed adobe walls and a bell tower, and lamplight glowed in the windows. Hiram knocked, and a sister answered, her face kind, but cautious.
We're looking for a woman who came here 2 days ago. She's carrying a locket, and she's in danger.
The sister hesitated, then stepped back and let them in. She's here, but she's frightened. She won't talk to strangers.
Tell her we're trying to help. We have evidence that can stop Beaumont Caldwell.
The sister nodded and disappeared down a hallway, and Bernice paced the small entry while Hiram kept watch at the window.
If Beaumont tracked her here, we're in trouble. This place can't hold off armed men.
Then we convince her fast and get moving.
The sister returned with a woman in her 40s, thin and pale, clutching a silver locket on a chain around her neck. Her eyes darted between them. Wary. You say you can stop Beaumont?
We can if you trust us. That locket proves something he doesn't want known. What is it?
The woman's hand closed over the locket, and tears welled up. It's a photograph of my sister and old Mr. Caldwell on their wedding day, taken 3 months before he died. She was his legal wife, and that makes her son the rightful heir, not Beaumont.
Beaumont knows about this.
The woman nodded. He had my sister killed in a riding accident that wasn't an accident, and he's been hunting the locket ever since. It's the only proof the marriage existed.
Then, we take it to the circuit judge, and we make sure Beaumont can't touch you or the boy. Where is he?
The woman's face crumpled. At the ranch, Beaumont's holding him there, saying it's for protection. But I know it's to keep me quiet.
Then we go get him tonight, before Beaumont realizes we're this close.
The sister shook her head. The ranch has 20 men. You can't fight that.
We don't fight. We sneak in, grab the boy, and get out before anyone knows we're there.
You're out of your mind.
You have a better idea.
She didn't, and the look on the woman's face said she'd take any chance to get her nephew back.
Fine. But we do this smart. No heroics.
They left the mission an hour later with the woman mounted behind Bernice on a borrowed horse, and Hiram led them cross-country toward the Caldwell Ranch. The moon was half full, and the night cool, shadows stretching long across the grassland, and Bernice felt the woman's fear in every tense grip on her waist. They stopped on a ridge overlooking the ranch buildings, lights blazing in the main house and bunkhouse, men moving between the corrals.
There, the small building on the north side. That's the guest house. If they're keeping the boy comfortable, that's where he'll be.
How do we get past the guards?
We wait until the shift change at midnight. There's always 5 minutes when everyone's distracted. We go then.
They waited in the cold dark, and Bernice found herself sitting close to Hiram, their shoulders pressed together for warmth.
You didn't have to come all the way out here. You could have stayed safe at the mission.
And miss all the fun. Not a chance.
He smiled, and his hand found hers in the dark, their fingers lacing together, and she felt that pull again, stronger now.
When this is over, if we're both still alive, I'd like to take you to dinner. Proper like.
Mr. Sullivan, are you asking me to court?
I'm asking if you'd let me try.
She squeezed his hand and leaned her head on his shoulder.
I'd like that.
Midnight came and the ranch yard shifted like clockwork. Men heading to the bunkhouse and new guards taking positions, and Hiram moved. They crept down the ridge on foot, leaving the woman with the horses, and circled wide to approach the guest house from behind. The building was dark except for one window with curtains drawn, and Hiram tested the back door. Locked.
I can force it. but it'll make noise.
Let me try.
She pulled 2 pins from her hair and worked them into the lock, fingers steady, and something clicked. The door swung open silent, and they slipped inside. The guest house was one large room with a stove, a bunk, and a table. A young man lay on the bunk, hands and feet bound, mouth gagged with cloth. Hiram knelt and cut the ropes, while Bernice kept watch at the door.
Can you walk?
The young man nodded and pulled the gag free, his voice hoarse. He looked maybe 21, scared but uninjured.
We're getting you out of here. Stay quiet and do exactly what we say.
They moved to the door, and Bernice held up a hand, 2 guards passing not 20 feet away, talking low. When the guards turned the corner, she gestured, and they slipped out, running low across the open ground toward the ridge. Shouts erupted behind them, lanterns swinging in the dark, and gunfire cracked the night. Hiram pushed the young man ahead and turned, firing twice to cover their retreat, and Bernice grabbed his arm.
Run. Don't be a hero.
They scrambled up the ridge, boots sliding on loose rock, bullets kicking up dirt around them. The woman with the horses had them ready, and they swung into the saddles. The young man doubled up behind Bernice, and they rode hard into the dark, with the sounds of pursuit growing behind them. They rode for an hour before Hiram called a halt in a dry wash where the banks gave cover. The horses were blowing hard, and the young man was shaking.
What's your name?
The young man swallowed. He said his name was Thomas Weaver, and he'd been working as a clerk for the land office in Rapid City. Caldwell had hired him to certify a deed transferring mineral rights on a section of federal land. Except the deed was forged, and when Thomas figured it out, Caldwell's men grabbed him.
Where's the deed now?
Thomas said Caldwell kept it in his safe at the ranch house. Without it, the claim wasn't legal. But with Thomas dead, or missing, there'd be no witness to challenge it.
So we need that deed.
We need that deed, and we need to get Thomas to the marshal in Deadwood. He's the only one who can testify.
Caldwell won't let us ride out of here without a fight.
Then, we fight.
Bernice checked her revolver and reloaded, her hands steady now, and Hiram watched her with something like pride.
You're full of surprises.
You have no idea.
They rested for 10 minutes, and then mounted up again, riding east toward the rail line. If they could reach the depot at Iron Mesa by dawn, they could put Thomas on the morning train to Deadwood and wire the marshal. But the night was dark, and the trail was rough, and behind them lanterns moved in the distance, Caldwell's men spreading out to cut them off. By 3 a.m, they were back on the main trail, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. Thomas was barely holding on, and Bernice let him ride alone while she doubled up behind Hiram, her arms around his waist, her cheek pressed to his back.
If we don't make it, I want you to know, I'm glad I met you.
We're going to make it.
But if we don't...
If we don't, I'm glad I met you too.
She tightened her arms, and he covered her hands with one of his. And they rode like that for a long stretch, the stars wheeling overhead, the air cool and dry. Then gunfire cracked behind them, and they looked back to see riders coming fast. Maybe a dozen men, lanterns swinging.
Go. Move.
They kicked the horses into a gallop, and the trail blurred beneath them. Rocks and sagebrush flashing past, the wind tearing at their clothes. Thomas's horse stumbled, and Hiram grabbed the reins, pulling the animal back up, and they kept running. The riders were gaining, close enough now that Bernice could hear the shouts, and she pulled her revolver and fired back blind, just to keep them cautious. One of the riders yelled and fell back, and the others spread out wider, harder to target.
There, the depot. I see the lights.
Iron Mesa rose ahead, the rail yard lamps like stars on the horizon, and they drove the horses straight for it, foam flying from the animals' mouths. Behind them, the riders closed to 100 yards, 50, and bullets whined past, one punching through Hiram's hat and sending it tumbling.
Your hat.
Forget the hat.
They hit the edge of town at a full run, and people scattered, shouting as they thundered down the main street toward the depot. The station agent came out with a lantern and froze when he saw them, and Hiram hauled his horse to a stop in a cloud of dust.
Get him on the next train to Deadwood. Wire the marshal. Tell him Thomas Weaver has evidence against Beaumont Caldwell for land fraud and kidnapping.
The agent blinked. The train wasn't due until 6. Hiram swore and looked back. Caldwell's riders were entering town, moving slow now, but spreading out to cover the exits.
We need to hold them off for 3 hours.
In the open, will never last.
The agent pointed to the freight warehouse next to the depot, a solid timber building with high, narrow windows.
That'll do. Come on.
They pulled Thomas off his horse and ran for the warehouse, Hiram kicking the door open. Inside were stacks of crates and sacks, tools, and a ladder to the loft.
Thomas, you stay in the loft. Keep your head down.
They hauled him up, and then Hiram and Bernice took positions at the windows, breaking out the glass with rifle butts. Caldwell's men dismounted and took cover behind the depot and the water tower, and for a moment, everything was still. Then a voice called out, smooth and cold. It was Caldwell himself, standing in the open with his turquoise ring flashing in the lamplight. He called for Hiram to send Thomas out and ride away. No harm would come to anyone.
You're a liar and a thief, Caldwell. We're not giving you anything.
Caldwell shrugged and raised his hand, and his men opened fire. Bullets punched through the warehouse walls, splinters flying, and Bernice ducked low.
This is insane.
This is Tuesday.
You have a very strange life.
You're in it now.
She laughed despite everything and fired back, and one of Caldwell's men yelped and dropped. The gunfire settled into a steady rhythm, Caldwell's men advancing by cover, trying to flank the warehouse. Hiram reloaded and moved to the side window, picking his shots, and Bernice stayed at the front, her hands rock steady now. Minutes dragged, and the air filled with smoke, and then one of Caldwell's men rushed the door with a torch. Hiram shot him, and the torch fell, rolling against the warehouse wall, and flames licked up the dry timber.
Hiram, we're on fire.
I noticed.
What do we do?
We don't burn.
He ran to the back wall and kicked through a rotten board, making a gap big enough to crawl through, and Bernice called for Thomas. The young man scrambled down from the loft, coughing, and they shoved him through the gap first. Bernice went next, squeezing through and tumbling into the alley behind the warehouse, and Hiram came last, pulling himself out as the flames roared up the wall. They ran for the rail yard, keeping low, and circled back toward the depot from the far side. Caldwell's men were focused on the burning warehouse and didn't see them slip into the depot building. The station agent was hiding under his desk, and Hiram hauled him up.
Where's the telegraph?
The agent pointed to the corner, and Hiram sat down, his fingers flying over the key, tapping out the message to Deadwood. Bernice stood guard at the door, watching Caldwell's men realize the warehouse was empty and start searching. Then Caldwell himself turned and saw her in the depot doorway, and his face went cold. He raised his hand, and the turquoise ring flashed, and his men started toward the depot.
Hiram, they're coming.
10 more seconds.
We don't have 10 seconds.
The telegraph clattered a reply, and Hiram ripped the message off and stood.
Marshall's on his way. He'll meet the train.
Caldwell reached the depot steps, and Hiram stepped out to meet him, rifle leveled.
It's over, Caldwell. Men can shoot me, but the law knows everything now. And Thomas is going to testify.
Caldwell's face twisted, and his hand dropped to his gun, and Bernice stepped beside Hiram with her revolver raised.
Don't.
For a long moment, nobody moved, and then the distant whistle of a train echoed across the plain. The morning train from the west, early, and it rolled into the station with a squeal of brakes. The conductor stepped down and froze when he saw the standoff, and Hiram gestured to Thomas.
Get on the train.
Thomas ran and climbed aboard, and the conductor followed, wide-eyed. Hiram backed toward the train, Bernice beside him, and Caldwell stood shaking with rage.
You lost. Walk away.
Caldwell's hand twitched toward his gun, and Hiram fired, the bullet kicking up dust at Caldwell's feet.
Next one's higher.
Caldwell stepped back, his men uncertain now, and the train started to move. Hiram and Bernice swung aboard the rear platform, and Caldwell shouted for his men to stop them. But it was too late. The train was gathering speed and pulling away from Iron Mesa, leaving Caldwell standing in the dust with his turquoise ring flashing useless in the dawn light. They rode the train to Deadwood and met the marshal at the station, a hard-eyed man named Garrett, who took Thomas's statement and promised to arrest Caldwell within the week. Then he looked at Hiram and Bernice, both filthy and exhausted, and shook his head. Garrett said they'd done a fool thing, but a brave one, and he'd make sure it got into the record.
Just make sure Caldwell goes to prison.
Garrett nodded and left with Thomas, and Hiram and Bernice stood on the platform, suddenly alone. The adrenaline was fading, and Bernice felt her legs shaking, and Hiram caught her elbow.
Come on. Let's find a place to sit down before you fall down.
They found a bench in the shade and sat, shoulders pressed together, and for a while neither of them spoke. Then Bernice started laughing, a little wild, and Hiram joined her.
We almost died. Multiple times.
But we didn't.
We burned down a warehouse.
It was already old.
You lost your hat.
I'll get a new one.
She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he put his arm around her, and they sat like that while the morning sun climbed, and the town woke up around them.
I meant what I said, about being glad I met you.
I meant it too, and I still want to take you to dinner, if you'll let me.
I will. But first I need a bath, and about 12 hours of sleep.
Fair enough.
He turned his head and kissed her forehead, gentle. And she looked up, and their eyes met.
Hiram.
Bernice.
And then he kissed her properly, slow and warm, and she kissed him back with her hands in his hair. And the world narrowed to just the two of them on a bench in the morning sun. They stayed in Deadwood for 3 days while the marshal built his case, and Hiram rented 2 rooms at a respectable boarding house, side by side. They spent the days walking the town and the evenings on the porch, talking and laughing. And every night, Hiram kissed her goodnight at her door and went to his own room, proper and careful. On the 3rd night, Bernice pulled him back when he started to leave.
Stay a while longer.
People will talk.
Let them talk.
So he stayed, and they sat together on her bed, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. And somewhere in the quiet hours, she fell asleep, with her head on his shoulder. He laid her down gentle and covered her with a blanket, and then he sat in the chair by the window and watched over her until dawn. When she woke and saw him still there, keeping guard, something in her chest cracked open warm and sure. On the fourth day, Marshal Garrett came to the boarding house with news. Caldwell had been arrested and charged, and Thomas's testimony was solid. The trial would be in 2 weeks, and they'd both need to testify. But until then, they were free to go.
We'll be back for the trial.
Garrett nodded and left, and Hiram looked at Bernice.
Where do you want to go?
Honestly, I just want to go home, to Iron Mesa, and see what's left.
Then, that's where we'll go.
They took the afternoon train west and arrived at Iron Mesa in the early evening. The burned warehouse was a blackened shell, but the town was intact, and people stared as they walked down the main street together. The mission hall was undamaged, and Bernice's camera equipment was still there, dusty but safe. She set up her dark room again and developed the plates she'd shot during the showdown. And the images were stark and powerful. The burning warehouse, and Caldwell's men, and the train pulling away.
You should sell these to a newspaper.
Maybe I will.
Hiram helped her hang the prints to dry, and then they walked back to the boarding house where she'd been staying before everything started. The landlady gave them a knowing look, but didn't say anything, and they sat on the porch in the fading light.
I meant what I said about courting you, if you're still interested.
I'm interested, but I need to know something first.
What?
Are you planning to stay in Iron Mesa? Or are you going to run again?
He was quiet for a long moment, and then he took her hand.
I've been running for 2 years, and I'm tired. I want to stay. I want to build something here, and I want to do it with you, if you'll have me.
I'll have you.
He pulled her close and kissed her, deep and sure. And she kissed him back with her arms around his neck, and the porch light flickered warm around them. The weeks until the trial passed in a quiet rhythm. Hiram found work at the rail yard, and Bernice reopened her photography studio, taking portraits and selling prints of the showdown to travelers. They spent their evenings together, walking the town or sitting on the porch, and the gossip started gentle but persistent. By the time they left for Deadwood, everyone in Iron Mesa knew they were courting, and the blacksmith had already started making jokes about wedding bells. The trial lasted 3 days, and Caldwell's defense fell apart under Thomas's testimony, and the evidence Hiram and Bernice provided. The judge sentenced Caldwell to 10 years in federal prison for fraud, kidnapping, and attempted murder. And when the verdict came down, Hiram squeezed Bernice's hand, and she squeezed back. Outside the courthouse, Garrett shook their hands and said they'd done good work.
What happens to Caldwell's ranch?
Garrett said it would be sold to pay restitution, and the land claim was void. Any homesteaders who'd been pushed off could file new claims through the land office, legal and square.
Good.
They took the evening train back to Iron Mesa and arrived after dark. The station was quiet, and they walked through the empty streets. And when they reached the boarding house, Hiram stopped.
I have something I need to ask you.
What?
Marry me.
She blinked, and then she laughed, surprised and delighted.
That's not a question. That's a command.
All right. Will you marry me?
Yes.
He pulled her close and kissed her, and she kissed him back. And under the porch light, they stood wrapped together, laughing and breathless. When they finally pulled apart, he was grinning like a fool.
I don't have a ring yet.
I don't care about a ring.
You'll have one anyway. I'll buy you the best one I can find.
I just want you.
You have me.
They went inside, and she pulled him into her room and shut the door. And the landlady downstairs smiled and shook her head and said nothing. The next morning they walked to the mission hall and asked the circuit preacher when he'd be back through Iron Mesa. He said 2 weeks, and they booked him on the spot. Bernice wrote to her family in Chicago with the news, and Hiram sent word to a few old friends, and the town got busy with preparations. The blacksmith did make a ring, a simple gold band with a tiny turquoise stone, and when Hiram gave it to her, Bernice cried and kissed him and said it was perfect. The wedding was small and warm, held in the mission hall on a bright afternoon with half the town in attendance. Bernice wore a cream dress she'd sewn herself, and Hiram wore a new black suit and a new hat. And when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd cheered. They had a supper at the boarding house afterward, and then Hiram took her hand and led her out to the porch. The sun was setting, and the sky was gold and pink, and they stood together, watching the light fade.
I can't believe we're married.
Believe it.
A month ago, I was just taking pictures of trains.
A month ago, I was just hauling freight.
And now,
we're married. And we're staying. And we're going to build a life here.
She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her, and they stood like that until the stars came out.
I love you.
I love you too.
And then he turned her around and kissed her, slow and deep. And she kissed him back with her hands in his hair, and the porch light flickered warm and steady around them. They spent their first night as husband and wife in the room at the boarding house, and in the morning they walked to the rail yard where Hiram had news. The rail company was expanding, and they needed a freight manager for the Iron Mesa depot. Steady work with good pay.
I took the job.
That's wonderful.
And there's a house for rent just south of town. 2 rooms and a porch. Nothing fancy, but it's ours if we want it.
I want it.
They moved in that week, and Bernice set up her darkroom in the spare room, while Hiram built shelves and repaired the porch railing. The house was small, but it was theirs, and every evening they sat on the porch and watched the trains come and go. Bernice kept taking photographs, and her work started appearing in newspapers back east. Pictures of the frontier and the railroad and the people making new lives in the Dakota Territory. Hiram's freight operation grew, and he hired 2 men to help. And the depot became the hub of Iron Mesa's trade. They were busy and happy and together, and the months rolled past warm and steady. One evening in late summer, they sat on the porch, and Bernice showed him a letter from a New York publisher. They wanted to print a book of her frontier photographs, 100 pages with commentary, and they were offering real money.
You're going to be famous.
I don't want to be famous. I just want to take pictures.
Then take pictures, and let them make you famous anyway.
She laughed and leaned against him, and he kissed the top of her head.
I couldn't have done any of this without you.
You saved my life about 6 times. I think we're even.
I love you.
I love you too.
The sun was setting, and the sky was burning gold and orange, and the evening train whistled in the distance. They sat together in the fading light, hand in hand, watching the world turn slow and warm around them. A year ago, Hiram had been running, and Bernice had been alone, and now they were here, together, building something real and good. The future stretched ahead like the open plain, wide and bright and full of promise. And whatever came next, they'd face it together, just like they'd faced everything else. Side by side, fearless and sure, in the warm evening light of Iron Mesa, Dakota Territory, 1887.